You're listening to 3 Days Through the Wood, a novel by Bear Mawasagi, as read by the author. Chapter 2, Pill and Chirp. Somewhere through the fog of a long and dreamless sleep, the sun found its way to the stranger, prying open his eyes with thin rays of light even as he tried to shut them out, rolling restlessly through the brush and burying his face in his fleece. It was warmer this morning, although the wind still carried the crisp bite of autumn. Suddenly, the light was eclipsed by the shape of something round. "You see any frogs in there?" The face of a young boy eclipsed the sun, round and red and winded looking, peering in through branches and brush to where the stranger had spent the night. Frightened, the stranger scrambled to his feet. "What?" he asked, brushing away twigs and leaves and pulling spiky burrs off of his clothes. He did his best to nonchalantly wipe dirt from his cheek. "Yes, maybe. No, I don't know." "They like to hide in bushes," said the boy. His face was cheerful. "I thought I smelled one, but I guess that was you. What were you doing there? Were you hunting frogs too? What's your name?" "Pill," said the stranger. It came to him unbidden, like a piece of driftwood rising out of a murky pond. "Pill?" said the boy, making a face. "What kind of name is that?" "It's a name," Pill said defensively, although he couldn't help but agree with the assessment. The name felt strange to him, incomplete, but fitting somehow. Much like his own surely storied history, he seemed to have forgotten all of it save for the very end. Pill really wasn't much of a name at all. "What about you?" he asked sharply. "What's your name?" "I'm Chirp," said Chirp. Unlike Pill, he looked uniquely suited to the moniker. The boy was short, Pill guessing his age at maybe 8 or 9 at the very oldest, and his eyes were bright green and perked at the prospect of a potential friend. His hair was a pair of auburn wings that flapped out from the sides of his head as he looked around excitedly. "It's not my real name, but Mom uses it all the time. She says she started calling me that because I talk too much, like a bird. You ever hear them out in the woods singing? Chirping? I'm like that, she says, so I guess that's my name now." His eyes were already wandering away as he spoke, glancing back to the bush where he had meant to find frogs. "Did you say you were hunting out here too?" "No, I didn't say that. I was just resting my eyes," said Pill, who again picked feebly at the empire of dirt laying claim to his face. It had been glued in place by a night's worth of drool, and it made him feel half buried. Oddly enough, Chirp didn't seem to find that odd at all. Pill could assume, rather safely, that the fact that the boy had asked his name meant they had never met before. And while he had the general sense that children could be some of the meanest creatures anywhere, he knew that Chirp wasn't much of a threat to him physically. And the boy was unarmed, save for a bright and curious smile. Therefore, Pill deemed it safe enough to ask him some questions. Chirp was already deep in the dirt, however, pushing through the thick of brush and branch before rising again with a few cuts along his cheeks, lined with thin but rapidly reddening strings of blood. He didn't seem to mind that at all. "Chirp," said Pill, "do you mind if I ask you something?" "If it's about hunting frogs, then I'm an expert." "Actually, I was wondering if you could tell me where we are exactly." "Well, I'm an expert at that too," Chirp chirped. "We're in the woods." "I know," said Pill, biting back his sudden irritation. He must have slept on the wrong side of the dirt. While he thought that children could be some of the meanest things in existence, he also wondered if they just might be the dumbest. It wasn't that he disliked the excitable young boy exactly, but there was something immediately irritating about having the obvious pointed out to him. "Of course we're in the woods," he said. "But what woods? Where are they? Do they have a name?" "Probably," the boy shrugged. "Most things do." "Do you know it?" "Nope. We could make one up, though." Chirp clapped his hands excitedly. "Oh, we could call it Frog Road. Froggy Road." "I haven't seen a single frog since I got here," said Pill. "Oh," said Chirp. "When was that?" Pill struggled for an answer, but he needn't have bothered. Chirp was good at filling silence on his own. "I definitely smelled a frog earlier," he said, brushing dirt off of his short pants. He was wearing a nice, if very well-worn, baggy red sweater. "Frogs around here get pretty big, "That's great, Chirp," said Pill. "Look, do you live around here? Is there someone older I could talk to, maybe?" "Why?" Pill hesitated. "I need some directions." "Well, I'm an expert at those, too," said Chirp. He pointed to the light of the rising sun and shouted gleefully, "East!" Flocks of birds scattered from the nearby trees. "That's great, Chirp. It's really helpful, but I was hoping I could ask an adult. Is your mom around here somewhere?"
"Nope,"
said Chirp. He smiled broadly.
"but that's okay. You're in good hands with me. I don't see any frogs around here, so I can help you out for a while. Oh, but if there's no frogs, we might have to rename the road."
"You really don't have to."
"Maybe Muddy Road."
Pill couldn't argue with him there, having just stomped into a great deal of muck himself. It wasn't awful, but the early morning mists had turned the dirt road a good deal more liquid than it had been the night before. At least the cold had kept it frozen then. The bun now clung stubbornly to his boots, coating the cheery red with thick layers of sullen brown. "I guess that works," said Pill, sighing. "So, do you live nearby? Maybe you can just bring me home with you and I can ask your mom about borrowing her phone."
"I don't think we have one of those,"
said Chirp. "Maybe she could drive me into town then," Pill pondered. "Is it very far from where you live?"
"I don't think she drives either. We don't go to town a lot."
Chirp bit his lip, deep in thought.
"There's nothing to do out there anyway. Not like around here."
"Well, I need to find my way to town," said Pill. He wasn't sure exactly where he was in the woods, or what he could hope to find in town, but it seemed as good a start as any. His only memories of home were little more than shadow lost in smoke, shaped roughly into the idea of a house. When he tried to grab at the image, it frayed along the edges, unraveling only to form again in the further corners of his mind. There was no easy way to explain all of that to a sub-10-year-old, however, nor did Pill have any desire to admit to his amnesia.
"Oh,"
said Chirp. "So I guess I'll just keep on walking then. You have fun hunting frogs. Maybe I'll see you around."
"All right,"
said Chirp, who sounded completely deflated in that way only children can muster over minor things. Pill might have felt guilty if he wasn't also very, very nervous about his lack of memory.
"Are you sure you don't want to stay and hunt frogs with me?"
"I can't, I'm sorry, but I have somewhere I'm supposed to be." It wasn't quite a lie exactly, but it was certainly less of a fact and more of a feeling. Pill couldn't help but think that he was here to do something, although he couldn't for the life of him remember what that something was.
"Me too,"
said Chirp, who started following the road alongside Pill.
"I'm supposed to be places all the time. Mom says I have a bad habit of wandering into places I shouldn't be."
Pill started walking faster. The boy matched his pace.
"I don't know why she's always worried," he continued. "How can you be lost in the woods when everything is woods? How is being near one tree different than being near another one? Like that one, or that one, or that one, or that—"
"I see your point."
"Or that one. Wait, that one's kind of ugly. The other one was better."
Chirp followed Pill excitedly around several bends in the path, pointing at and comparing the beauty of various trees in all their colors, all of which Pill thought looked more or less the same. If it weren't for the sun staying at his back as it slowly climbed into the sky, he might have suspected they were wandering in circles. Every new bend in the road seemed to look exactly like the last. Chirp, however, noticed every slight difference in every tree and brush they passed, each of which he suspected of harboring some interesting secret. Even when a rather ornery bee caught him by the palm while searching through a brush, his spirit of exploration remained untarnished. He called out excitedly at each of his discoveries as he turned over the leaves and flowers, sharing rocks and pointy sticks and the many varieties of many-legged insect he found with Pill before discarding them in favor of his newest find.
"Maple,"
said Chirp, as he threw another branch off into the forest.
"Tastes kind of sweet when you chew it, but the sap is best."
"You mean the syrup?" Pill asked. "Yeah, it's pretty good, I guess, but not right from the tree."
"I like it fresh,"
said Chirp, who was searching for more samples. His fingers grew increasingly sticky as he fondled the bark, adding to his general sense of grubbiness. Were children always this gross? Pill couldn't remember. He wondered if he too had had dirt stacked under his nails as a child, arms sticky with sap and mud and other things one can only find along the underside of heavy rocks. For him, trees brought to mind the smell of paper, particularly in the form of freshly opened books, and he couldn't imagine wanting to dirty those pages. Trying to remember what he might have read about, however, was another story entirely. It was like trying to see through the static of an untuned television, or listening for voices in a broken radio. Sometimes he could almost see or hear through the fuzz, picking out patterns if he really tried at it, but they were quickly lost again, and he couldn't be sure he hadn't imagined them to begin with. "Where are you trying to go?" Chirp asked. He was jumping behind Pill, following his muddy footprints. "I told you already, I'm heading to town." "Me and Mum do that sometimes, usually just for food." "Then it would make sense that this road leads to town, right?" "Are you hungry?" "No," Pill sighed. "Maybe, I don't know." His stomach hadn't really been bothering him so far, but suddenly he worried that that might be due to advanced starvation. Was that how it worked? He wasn't sure. He ran his hand around his wrist again, noting the fragility of the branch-like limb, and wondered if maybe he was hungry after all. Mostly he felt cold, even as the sun continued to rise. Could that be a side effect of something, perhaps? He knew it had to be a little odd, at least, because even as he bundled his fleece tighter, Chirp was pulling at the collar of his sweater, starting to glisten from the sheer effort of all his walking and jumping and hunting. "I'm just trying to get somewhere," said Pill. "Maybe you should figure out where that is before you go," said Chirp. Again, he was stating the obvious. "And how exactly am I supposed to do that?" Pill wanted to ask him. "It's not like you've been any help so far. It's not like I even asked you to follow me. I don't care about finding frogs or what your mom does in town or how one tree doesn't look like the others. I just want to know where I'm supposed to be and what I'm supposed to be doing out here, and it really isn't helping that you keep talking about all these things that I just don't care about." He ranted about all that and more, but only in his mind. Chirp continued on obliviously, cheerfully even. That only made Pill more upset as he continued to fume silently. The first sign that there was anything more to this forest than more forest was the sight of a small stone bridge arcing over a river. Pill wasn't even sure it was a river so much as an uppity-looking stream, but it had depth enough that someone had seen fit to stack stones over top it. The bridge was actually well constructed, Pill thought, even if it did look old. Moss crept along the sides in between the stones and hung down in long curtains, trailing along the surface of the water. For a moment, he feared the sight of the straw hat girl rising out of the river, reaching for him again with her bloodied hand. Pill steadied himself. Chirp wasn't bothered by the bridge or the water. He stood taller than Pill as he balanced himself along the stone railing, walking foot over foot like a tightrope walker. "The best kind of frogs," he started, and trailed off into something Pill didn't care much about. His thoughts were elsewhere. The Straw Hat Girl lurked behind the shadows of his memories like a monster on the prowl, waiting for him to stop so she could strike again in the forest green. She had scared him in a way he couldn't put to words, and part of him, that small, childish voice in the back of one's brain that still fears shadows and things hiding in the dark, told him that she must be a ghost of some sort. Which was absurd, of course. Those were the things of stories. So how had she emerged from the water like that? Chirp continued his rambling about things that Pill was probably supposed to be listening to, but he tuned him out long enough that he didn't at first notice when the boy stopped talking. His excessive exuberance cut sharply, however, and was followed by a loud splash and a soft, "Up!" Then there was a thrashing down in the river. "Chirp?" Pill asked stupidly. The boy wasn't his responsibility, he told himself. This wasn't his fault, and surely Chirp knew how to swim. What little boy didn't? Pill's protests and justifications immediately rang hollow, however. He was alone with a child in the forest, and as the closest thing to an adult, that by default made him responsible for his well-being. Pill lurched over the railing, trying to spot Chirp. He didn't stop himself when the momentum lifted his feet over the edge. Before he even realized what he was doing, Pill plunged deep into the water. He already felt cold that morning, but the river washing over him was like the first wet breath of winter, soaking through his clothes and skin and finding its way deep into his veins, turning his blood to ice. He couldn't see anything under the surface aside from more hazy shadows. The water was far deeper than he had expected it to be, and far faster as well. Soon the sight of the bridge vanished beyond a bend in the river. "Help!" he heard briefly. It came from further down the current. "Help!" The words were half in the water. Taking a deep breath and letting the cold sink into him, Pill dived below again, looking through the haze and murk for shadows roughly in the shape of children. They seemed to be everywhere. None were moving or thrashing about, but several smaller shadows around him looked to be swimming more frantically out of his reach. Fish, alarmed at their sudden visitor, split their great schools around him as Pill swam onward. They were doing the same thing around something up ahead. Pill watched as the current brought him closer and noticed the intrusion of another visitor. Chirp was sitting at the bottom of the water. He swam deeper as he could go, even as his body tried to float back to the surface, and dragged his arms through mud and rocks to crawl closer to the boy. When he got close enough, he wrapped his arms around him. The burning in Pill's legs raged against the cold of his skin, but slowly he started to rise back to the surface. He may not have been starving exactly, but something that was quickly becoming clear to Pill was just how fragile he really was. He struggled to reach the surface of the water, feeling half a stone as he tried to rise with Chirp, but somehow he managed. He was relieved to see Chirp still breathing after he dragged them both to the bank of the river. After a lot of coughing and a good bit of wheezing on both their parts, they started to smile. Pill's wasn't as bright as Chirp's. Actually, it was somewhat guarded, but the relief was clear on his face. He had done it. "Are you all right?" he asked.
"Yeah," said Chirp. "I just slipped."
"That was more than a slip," said Pill.
"You almost drowned.
"Don't you know how to swim?"
"Not with pants on," said Chirp, who was wringing out the end of his sweater.
Pill sighed, but this time it was with a bit of a laugh.
"We should get you home," he said. "Your mom is probably worried about you."
He lifted himself and surveyed the river, trying to judge how far they had drifted from the road. Chirp nodded, but didn't stand. Instead, he twiddled his thumbs while looking absently around the forest.
"So, which way are we headed?"
That way," said Chirp. The boy didn't move at all, however.
"Off in the woods."
Pill sighed again. Chirp was staring aimlessly into the river, while shadows of fish continued to swim below the surface. Realizing suddenly what had happened, Pill sat down beside him.
"Chirp,"
he said gently.
"Are you lost?"
The boy didn't look at him.
"It's okay to admit if you are," he said even more softly. "You can tell me."
Now that he suspected Chirp was lost in the woods as well, he wondered how he had failed to see it in the first place. Little boys wandering alone through the forest wasn't exactly a common sight. Alarms should have been ringing in his head immediately. They might have been, too, if he hadn't been so consumed with his own problems. When Pill sighed again, it was with frustration at himself.
"If you need help, you only have to ask," he said.
"I think I'm lost," said Chirp. He dragged his finger around in the mud, drawing patterns and digging holes while keeping his face to the ground.
"Mom said to stay where I was. She was going to come right back. I didn't mean to wander so far away, but I did, and when I tried to go back, all the trees looked the same. I tried to find her. I thought I even heard her once, but..."
His voice trailed off into mumbles that veered on sobbing.
"It's okay,"
said Pill. Somewhat awkwardly, he put an arm around the boy. They shivered along the edge of the water together while looking off in different directions, pretending to admire the autumn leaves for a while. When Chirp finally looked back at him, it was with mostly dried eyes and a nose that wasn't running quite as much.
"I'm lost too,"
Pill admitted.
"Really?"
asked Chirp.
"Yeah, I didn't want to say anything because I guess I was embarrassed, but... well, I don't have any idea where I'm going either."
"So what are we going to do?" Pill thought about it for a moment. The sound of the water trickling by was calming, and although he was cold, the sun was bright and warm on his skin. The day was still long ahead of them.
"I guess we'll just have to follow the road together,"